welcome to the Racers 360 free webinar. We're excited to have you. I've got Racers 360 coach Nelson joining me here today, and really excited. I think Nelson's one of the very best coaches in the country, if not the world. So excited to have him and all of you guys here as well. So just to kind of a little bit of housekeeping here today, I would like to send out a poll to everybody. So it's going to be 2 questions. It's just going to give us a better idea for how to phrase some of the things we're coaching with. So I'm going to put that out there. If you can, just answer the quick 2 questions. We'll end that after that, and then we'll go through once we have an idea of who's all here and see what's going on. So we got a lot of time trial drivers here, some wheel-to-wheel drivers. Nice, good mix here. Awesome. Mostly wheel-to-wheel and HPD time trial. Awesome mix. So let's go ahead. We got enough votes getting in here. Thank you guys for voting. So mostly wheel-to-wheel, as you can see, 73%. Some of you guys worked with us before. Very cool. So just as an FYI, you guys can chat with us during the webinar. Ask us questions. That's what we're here for. So if you have this scroll over the screen where you see our beautiful or ugly faces, whatever you think, you go down to the bottom and there's a chat button. You can open up the chat and ask us questions. Like I said, communicate with us during. We'll constantly look at that. Just as an FYI, we are going to share our screens. When we do that, it's a little bit annoying, but it's going to go full screen on your end. If you just hit your escape key, it will minimize the full screen and you'll see that chat box. If you want to leave it as full screen, I believe at the top you can get the chat box to appear again, just as an FYI. So I think we are ready to get going. What do you think, Nelson? You guys all set?
Absolutely.
Cool. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I've got an onboard video lined up, ready to go to talk about the very first thing that I want to expand upon. So like I said, if it's full screen, you lost your chat, you can just hit the escape key and get that back open. I am going to, if I can figure out where my chat box is gone here, I've lost my chat box too. So Nelson, if you can take a look at the chats while they're coming in.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what I want to talk about is the #1 mistake that I see drivers making, and it revolves around their initial throttle application spot. Now, if you've been coached by me before for Racers 360, you've likely heard a lot of this before, but we're going to talk about it in a few different ways. So we've got our driver here. What I want you to do is I want your eyes looking at the throttle trace down here in the bottom right. So I'm going to play at full speed. Hopefully everyone can see. See how we've got a pretty good initial brake pedal here. We're braking in, we're turning in, we've got a little bit of trail brake, but what we're going to look for is notice how our driver starts to feed in the throttle right here. Now, this is where most drivers start to go wrong at any level of the sport. They're starting to apply the throttle way too early. So you can see here, our driver is still carving to the apex. They're still asking for that front grip. They want the car to turn. But at that same moment, their foot is starting to apply the throttle. And what happens when we start to apply the throttle? Well, we take weight off the front end. The weight shifts back. And where the weight goes is where the grip goes. So while their body and everybody's asking for that front grip, they are taking away front grip with their pedals. So they're fighting themselves here. And because of that, we're going to have a throttle trace that isn't very pretty. So you can see here, they're starting to feed it in, feed it in, feed it in. And now, see how they're going to pause. It's pausing about 30–40% throttle. It's holding, starting to increase again. Then it actually drops a little bit here. They're starting to have to release the throttle because of the understeer they induce into the car. And now what we're going to see is they're only going to get back to full throttle as they get out to the exit curve. They're pretty much at the exit curve already, and they're still at partial throttle, still at partial throttle. Finally, only as our right front gets out to the exit curve are they getting back to full throttle. So let's talk about, other than the weight transfer inducing understeer, why is this a negative? And then how can we fix this? So what we're looking at here is a throttle trace. If I'm going to draw this of what it would look like on data, is their throttle trace here, they start to pick it up. Actually, let me use a different color. Actually, I'll keep it red. So they're starting to pick up the throttle, and then they have this long pause, pause, pause. They actually release the throttle, and then finally pick up the full throttle way out over here, where the perfect throttle trace would look much closer to something like this. So notice how it's not an on-off switch, but they're getting back to full throttle much, much earlier. So why is our driver picking up the throttle too early? Well, there's two reasons why drivers pick up the throttle too early. One is not the case here, but it's in those higher speed, high commitment corners where you want to settle the rear end a little bit. You want to add a little bit of rear grip to the car. So adding a little bit of throttle there is okay. In a corner like this, in the majority of the times, drivers are getting the throttle because they've overslowed. And in their mind, they're turned in, they feel too slow, and they're like, oh, I'm too slow, let me get to throttle. Problem with that is we're making a mistake. What we call overslowing is a mistake. We're creating a bad habit out of it as well, because like we talked about before, we're shifting the weight back. So it's like we've lowered the maximum amount of grip this car has from here. That let's say a pro driver would get in this car and they can roll, let me move my chat box out of the way here. We're at 45 miles an hour here and a minimum of 42. Let's say a pro driver and ultimately driving this car could roll 48 miles an hour through here. But they couldn't do that if they're trying to get the throttle too early. So they're lowering the ceiling of grip, the ultimate grip the car has, because they're working the weight transfer incorrectly. And the problem with that too is it makes you feel like you're closer to the limit of the car. So a lot of amateur drivers think that they're pretty close to the limit of the car, where there's a whole nother level they can take it to by manipulating the car weight transfer correctly. Now, this next thing may be controversial and goes against some things that you guys have been taught, but everything about learning and driving a race car is having the right priorities. So if you guys have heard the term or heard the phrase, you need to always be on the throttle or brakes, let us know, because a lot of drivers have indeed been told they have to be on one or the other. Now, the problem there is, while that is somewhat true, long-term, yes, that is a bit faster, it sets drivers up incorrectly. So now, if you've been taught that and you're super concentrated on that, you're coming into the corner, you've got this little bit of trail brake, and you feel like you're going too slow, and then you said, well, I have to be on throttle, or I have to be on the brakes, right? So they start to apply the throttle too early. What is more important for drivers to concentrate on, rather than feeling like you always have to be on the throttle or brakes, you're allowed to coast. Nelson, I mean, driving in the pro racing, you spent a good amount of time coasting every once in a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have, you have those moments where the car you're going to have the car on the edge. So adding more brake or adding more throttle, you're going to definitely be upsetting the car, especially when you're increasing the steering. So I always use the explanation, if we're going to be at 100% load on the tire, the tire can't suddenly go to 150% load. And what I mean by that is, if we go full brake, we're realistically using 100% of that tire. If we're going full throttle, we're realistically using 100% of that tire. If we're at full steering and full, let's say, lateral G-force, we're using all the tire can provide, and adding throttle or adding braking into this will only cause the tire to then start to slip, where we lose grip. So there's a lot of times where you really have to, and there's a lot of tracks that have that, where you'll have a really quick corner that kind of comes into a braking zone. You'll use that as your coast, and you're carrying the speed through the quick part of the section, setting the car up so that you can brake in a straight line. But you will 100% utilize the coast as much as possible. It's, when you're not decelerating, it's always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about here, let's say the ultimate way we would want to drive this corner is to trail brake down to that hairpin, down to that apex, and then as you're ready to unwind the steering wheel, go to throttle. But most of us aren't ready there yet. And the problem with telling drivers that they always have to be on the brakes or throttle is, if they're not ready to trail brake and have that technique all the way down, we're starting to find this too early to throttle syndrome that we're seeing here. So what's more important is where you pick up the initial throttle. So if we're working with this driver, I would say wait until here, and then we're going to get the throttle. Now, to start off with things, they're going to then brake at the same point, do everything the same, come into the corner, and allow themselves to coast. Wait, 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 go, 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 go. That is going to make us go slower initially. And what's important to know here is, as you work on cleaning up where you're getting the throttle, sometimes we have to take one step back to take 5 steps forward. Now, what we're trying to do here is get the weight transfer of the car correct so we can unlock a whole nother kind of level of speed. So it's more important than always trying to feel like you need to be on brakes or throttle is where you get back to initial throttle. So with our driver here, like we talked about, we want to delay that initial throttle. And what we want to do is be able to set them up to roll in more entry speed and also maximize their exit as well. So what we're going to do here is to roll in that more entry speed to solve our overslowing problem. We don't want to talk about braking any deeper. So our driver comes in here, they've got a pretty clean hit of the initial brakes. They're coming in, they're getting up to peak brake pressure, maybe slightly later than we want, but that's okay. What we're going to talk about here is coming off the brakes and let the car coast initially. And that's going to be step one of solving our overslowing problem, because now we're going to let the car roll through the apex. We're going to have a car that's going to be set up looking more down the road. We're going to be looking more in this direction, where our driver right now is looking more in this direction because of that understeer they've induced into the car. And that means they're going to be able to get back to full throttle much faster. They're going to be back to full throttle by about here. And they're going to roll in more entry speed. So now we're starting to maximize our entries and maximize our exits as well. Step two of the overslowing problem is concentrating on the middle part of the brake zone. And this is where trail braking starts to come in and start to take effect. And we're going to really go through steps 1 and 2 today, and because that's where most amateur drivers are. And step 3 is kind of another level. So step 2 is we want drivers to brake at exactly the same point with exactly the same brake pressure, getting up to that peak brake pressure the same. But where most drivers go wrong is they're holding that heavy brake pressure, and they've got a small amount of trail brake, very small amount. What we want drivers to concentrate on is braking exactly the same point with exactly the same initial brake pressure, but then coming off of that heavy brake pressure earlier, and then allowing themselves to brake for a longer period of time, braking down to that apex point. And you'll see, because of the difference off the back end of the slope of the line, that's where our second level of entry speed will come from. And now that's where we're able to start really trail braking into the corner and getting that rotation. But remember, this is step 2. The first thing here is we can do everything the same on the brakes, but get off of it and let it roll to the apex. The more important thing, the most important thing, is where are you picking up initial throttle? Are you waiting until your hands can start to unwind? Because that's what it needs to happen. Everything that we're looking at here is your feet and your hands have to be connected. If you're turning into the corner, you need to be releasing off the brake pedal almost at the same rate as you're turning. As you're ready to start applying the throttle, you need to start unwinding the steering wheel. If you find that you start to apply the throttle and you're actually turning more, or you've got no release, you've applied the throttle too early. So that's really what we want to talk about the most and help you guys focus on the most from my point of view, is where are you getting the throttle? And now I do have another little quick data point for us to look at here, which I think will be pretty cool. For everybody that's more into data, here is actually some data to help us talk a little bit more about what we're trying to show. And if you've got any questions for all of you that have joined in the last few minutes here, make sure you open up the chat box, ask us questions. I know Nelson's been answering a lot of good nutrition questions. Ask anything you want. If you want to ask about trail braking or where we're starting to get the throttle, join in. If you have any other questions, of course, feel free to ask them. So here what we're looking at, where I want to kind of attract your eyes, let me just move this to a better spot. So let me get a different color too. So I want everybody looking in this section here. And what we're looking for is, what we're looking at is, here is speed, and delta is the second one, and this box here is throttle. So you can see this is exactly what we've just been talking about. If I zoom in here, notice how the green lap actually has a little bit more entry speed that they've rolled in. Where is my little box? So there it is. So you can see just before they get the throttle, the green lap's been able to roll in 4 kilometers faster. Now you quite often hear slow and fast out, right? It's not entirely true without the right technique. So you can see our red lap is slower in. They get back to initial throttle earlier. Our red lap is back to throttle here, a good bit before our green lap. And our green lap, you can see, has that spike of throttle right here and then drops off of it. So the green lap's not a perfect throttle application. But you can see the green lap is later to throttle, has more entry speed, but they're getting back to full throttle earlier. And what we're going to see is that is going to pay off. So both laps into the braking zone, they're almost identical, 0.03 of a second difference. The red lap picks up the throttle first. They're back to full throttle after the red lap, so they gain a little bit of time through the middle of the corner, about a half a tenth or a tenth. But now we're going to see down this next little straightaway here at New Jersey, they're just losing time, and it ends up being about nearly 0.2 of a loss because of that early to throttle, late to full throttle. So once again, what we're looking at, let me just highlight everything, is you can see the red lap picks up, whoops, let me get the right, sorry about that. The red lap picks up the throttle here, but only gets back to full throttle way out over here. The green lap, I'm going to use green for that, picks up initially the initial throttle here, not ideal, but gets back to full throttle later. So picking up that throttle later is allowing that rotation, allowing them to get back to full throttle earlier, and that is really the important thing. Where are you getting back to initial throttle? Where are you getting back to full throttle? That needs to be much higher up on our priority list of drivers of what we're focusing in on, and that's what's going to unlock a lot of speed. So that's been my portion of what I wanted to focus in on. We're going to hand things over to Nelson, who has a completely different idea of what he likes to focus in on the most. Of course, if any of you have any questions, let us know in the chat. You know, if nothing doesn't make any sense, if you have, like I said, questions, ask us in the chat. We're here to answer. Nelson, I'll let you kind of go over what you want to talk about. And at the end, we've got some announcements. So please stay through. We have some really exciting news at the end of the webinar.
All right. Yeah. So that's what Dion and I have been talking about, is really the two main things that we see on a consistent basis. So number one is, exactly to Dion's point, is really to you know, where we're getting on the throttle and at what point we're getting on the throttle, and how that's affecting us in the way that we can approach each corner. The other side of it is really the thought process behind how we're taking the corner. So how we're taking our lines, why we're choosing lines the way that we are. So that's really it. One of the main one of the main areas that I've found a lot of time is left on the table, let's say, by amateur racers, is really just that. You know, it's easy time that we're leaving there based on the decisions that we've made. It doesn't require, you know, more bravery or risk or anything like that to find that time back. It's just simply line choice. So every corner has a particular way through it that's the best way. And, you know, it can be quite clear on some corners, but once we start throwing in adjacent corners or corners coming up right after it, short shoots, long shoots, you know, like a long straight after a corner, elevation changes, attacking and defending zones. This changes the way that we will attack each particular corner, and the way that the line that we'll choose, and how it will differ us in the way that we approach the corner. So it's extremely important to analyze each corner as a portion of the racing lap. So analyzing the racing lap as a whole and looking at, okay, so if this is turn 5, how does turn 5 lead into turn 6? Is it a long straight leading to turn 6? Is it a short shoot leading into turn 5? Where is the important section, and where am I going to find time out of this? So, for example, I'm going to use, may not be as quick on the switchbacks as Mr. Dion here, but so I'm going to use a little portion from Bahrain, which is a unique track in itself. But we'll use this as an example going into a hairpin. So it's a hairpin, left-hand hairpin, leading, in the way that we would approach it, or the way that we would treat it differently, is if it was leading into a long straight, then for sure we want to late apex that hairpin, get a tremendous exit out, and get a run down the straight. If it's something a little different, if it's, in this case, leading into a right-left section after the hairpin, then we have to prepare the car differently. So I'll run through the area of the corner here, and we'll just backtrack and kind of go through the decision that can change and where we can gain time without necessarily having to brake later or anything like that. So what we've done here is now I'm just going to backtrack here a little bit.
I'm going to turn the volume off just really quick, Nelson, just so everyone hears you over the car noise.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so what we've done here is we've taken a really late apex to really maximize the exit as much as possible. So I understand the thought process that's behind it. We're maximizing the exit, but then I'm just going to roll through, I guess I can roll through a little quicker. So we're maximizing the exit here, and that's great. And we're realistically preparing to carry that speed through the right left. Where the strategy sort of lets us down is the fact that we're not flat through that right left. So we've sacrificed the hairpin in order to prepare for the exit, but now we haven't maximized that sacrifice because we then have to lift soon after to get through the right-hander and then lift again soon after to get through the right or the left-hander. So where we're exiting on the hairpin is correct, but what the plan needs to be is that our exit speed is not the important factor here. The important factor is how long we're in the hairpin for and how, let's say, just the amount of time that we're waiting to get the car rotated around. So
it sounds like to me, and the way I like to talk about this, and I'd be interested to hear your standpoint, is we're really trying to ask ourselves, if I'm going to be faster from point A to point B or point B to point C, which distance is longer and which is at a higher speed? Those are the two main factors we should be thinking about, correct?
Absolutely. And it's not just, how are we going to get from point A to point B per se? It's how are we going to get from point A to point C? So what's going to be the quickest time for us to get through this entire section rather than this specific corner leading on to the next specific corner, leading on to the next specific corner. So taking it out of sort of the glass bubble of each specific corner themselves and growing that into a bigger thing. So if we take a narrower line in here, I'll draw it in here. So right now we're taking a pretty wide line and then cutting back to clip the apex on the exit. And that's good. And that's, if we were leading on to a really long straight, that would be the line. But because we're not leading onto a really long straight, if we bring it in a little bit tighter, we cut all of this distance off here. So we're realistically saving ourselves. Our minimum speed will be somewhat the same. Our exit speed right now, let's say taking the green line, will be a little bit lower. But what that does for us is that by the time we get into the right-hander, our speeds are the same. So the time that we've actually saved ourselves by coming in a little bit more aggressively into the hairpin is actually going to be a greater time found than the time that we've, say, lost on the short shoot of the exit. So it's just more to my point, it's just about having a strategy and knowing why we're doing each corner the way that we're doing, rather than just doing the corner the way that somebody told us to do it per se. So I'm going to cut from the hairpin and focus more on let's say a place that we can all relate to a little bit more, since we're not all driving in Bahrain here.
It does look an awesome track though, I'm not gonna lie.
So I'm going to cut to pit race here. And so this is a section, again, where really it's all about how we think about it. And you can see pit race, right?
I think you got to unshare your.
Okay, here.
There you go.
We're going to do this. Sorry. Okay.
If you unshared?
You have it?
let me do this. I'm gonna unshare you, and then you'll let you reshare again. And then there you go. That should be good. Actually, wait. Sorry, I still see Bahrain on your end.
Okay, new share.
So if you go stop share at the top.
Yep.
There you go. And then
okay, I got you.
Pit race. First webinar was.
Guys and gals.
Okay.
Gotcha. Why are we still on? Okay. So here I'm going to close this maybe.
And you should have, if you should share your desktop and open up the video, you should be good to go. There you go.
This is the wrong one. Okay. So I think
I can open up if you want.
Yeah, I think just the video, I've lost the video, so.
Okay, sorry everybody, give us 1 second here. Oh wait, that looks good. I see pit race.
Okay.
Can everybody else see pit race? Give us a yay in the chat box if you can. Hopefully, I think we should be good to go. Awesome.
All right. Okay, so now this is leading into a massively difficult section, which every video I've done, everybody's done it differently. So, and for sure here, it's going to be, again, I guess the whole point of what I'm getting at is it's the way that we strategize our lines and the way that we decide that this is the line that we're going to take. So running through here, this is a really, really difficult section. And then because it's a right, left, right, left, right, it's a constant flowing section. So because of that, it's very difficult to determine what's important and what's not important. And what do we sacrifice and what do we not sacrifice? So as we roll in here, I mean, there's 2 lefts, there's 3 rights, and the final right, just for anybody that we'll play through it, so anybody that hasn't seen it yet before. So we go through a right, we go through a left, we go through then another slightly more open right, a slightly more open left, and then a very open right. Now,
it's faster and faster.
Exactly. So, and the key here is that this is actually the only part of the whole section that leads on to somewhat of a straightaway. So taking this all into account, it's very difficult to determine where do I attack, where do I not attack, and do I just kind of, like in this video per se, we're just kind of, let's say, halfway committed in each corner. So we drive in, we stay middle of the road on the exit coming out of this right. Then we stay middle of the road coming out of the left, middle of the road out of the right, left, etc., all the way through. So instead of doing that, if we look at it and decide, okay, if there's a way that we can attack this and carry more speed, then let's do it. So as we come in here, we have a braking zone, and we'll see when we come through the right-hander, there's actually, and we can see, let me use a green line. We can see if we came over here, there's a lot of black marks down here where people have been braking and kind of pinching it into the left. And that's really what I would suggest is as we come around here, I'll use red. As we come around here, holding it sort of mid-track or right, we've now sacrificed this corner here, and we are going to sacrifice this corner here because then we have to stay mid-track. So we're sacrificing not 1, but 2, and then we'll sacrifice the next one and then the next one to all for the final. So we're actually sacrificing 4 of our 5 corners. If we take a different mentality to it, we can roll in here and say, okay, if I attack through number 1, I'll have to sacrifice number 2. So let's say we come flying in here. I'm going to use the nice wide line. We come flying in here, and then we have to keep it tight through the left because we've got nowhere else to go. We have to sacrifice it, and that's where our minimum speed is going to be. So we come in here, and if we keep it to the left, then we have to be tight there. but that's now opened us up for the next right-hander. So then we're going to actually be quicker through there. So we were quicker through the first right-hander, and we'll be quicker through the second right-hander. What that leads in taking that approach moving forward is we keep it tight here to prepare us better so that, let's say, we're more getting back over to the left side of the circuit. We've got a much more open entry. We can really attack this right-hander more, and then the left is going to always be tight for us. So it is what it is. That's, again, another corner that we're going to have to sacrifice.
Hey, Nelson, if I jump in for a quick second?
Absolutely.
You know what I think an interesting point, and I'm actually learning a little bit here, which is cool. So if you back it up to 7, which is the first right-hander, actually go into the previous left-hander. One of the important points to think about is, can you make up times? If you come back just like perfect there. And I think what you're saying, and this is just a different way to describe things, which is important for everybody to hear different perspectives, is if I, like, let's say, sacrifice this previous race and try to get back to throttle, there's not enough time to really make up the speed loss. So if you bring in the speed through 7 and you're going to arrive into 8 with an extra 5 miles an hour to make a number up, that's going to carry that entry speed through 8, the next left-hander that you can bring in, is something that you can't make up for by sacrificing. So by rolling in that entry speed, you're going to keep faster all the way through the section, because these like sections where you're going left to right switchbacks, it's not an area we can like make up for time loss. Hopefully that makes sense. Would you agree with that?
You're absolutely right, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Is if we watch the speed here, we basically stay in and around the same speed the whole time through. Instead of really, you know, if we attack through here, carry the speed in, yes, we're, you know, maybe 5 miles per hour quicker. And then we have to keep it tight through the left, but we have to keep it tight through the left anyway. So we might as well try to at least win a little bit in the right-hander. And
so,
yeah, go ahead.
We had one question come in that I just wanted to hit on for Austin. He's asking, is that because there's not enough time to get back to full throttle and near full throttle? Austin, what I would say is, what you have to think about more than that is, if I've rolled in 5 miles an hour more, and let's say you get back to full throttle before me, you still have to account for the additional time it'll take you to not only catch back up to that additional 5 miles an hour I've rolled in, but then surpass it for a bigger distance. So hopefully that makes sense, where it's sometimes it's more important. Let's say you might be on full throttle for an extra second, but if I've rolled in 5 miles an hour more than you, and then the next corner you're only holding that full throttle for an extra second, it's not going to make up for that 5 miles an hour difference. You might catch back up or get back to even, but then you're not going to make up for the time that you lost from the loss of entry speed.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so as it carries, like, I mean, it's all a thing where it's, you know, how much time can I make up in one corner with a corner that I'm already having to kind of give up on anyway. So instead of giving up on all 5 corners, so to speak, and being in and out and not fully committed, what it all leads up into, and we can roll forward here. So we'll then, you know, be able to, let's just say, and I'm using it purely as an example, like I said, it's different for everybody's car, but if we can attack through the right-handers of this section, you know, and use the left-handers to just prep our car for the next right-hander, we're going to, as a whole, gain, because the way that I'm going to get tricky here.
Everybody watch out.
So if we, let's say this is going to be the worst track map of all time, but we're going to use it anyway. If we say that.
Exactly, Peter. That's a good point. He just brought up a point. A prime example might be pitting under yellow, where you lose relatively less time. This concept allows you to make up relatively more time. That's actually a good way to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the worst track map.
I don't think you've got a career as an artist coming up your way.
I'm on the edge of my desk, so I'm okay. Well, this is terrible, and we're not going to get across it all. But I guess what I'm saying is, instead of just kind of, you know, having to My engineer would always say half-ass it all the way through the right, left. Instead, we're really gaining the time through the right-hander, not losing a significant amount of time through the left, gaining time through the right again, not losing time through the left, and then gaining through this right all the way down the straight. So we're realistically gaining coming into this right-hander, treating the middle as, damage limitation, and then gaining on the exit. So instead of just being not really committed through any of this, because we have to wait, and knowing that, we don't really accelerate until the exit of the final right-hander. If we can, attack in and attack out, it'll be significantly beneficial to our lap time. So as we roll out of this right-hander and we are attacking, we'll be more to the left side of the circuit here and have to keep it a little bit tight over the hill. But then we'll put ourselves in a situation where we can be basically flat through this right. So instead of, I guess here is the most important part of the section. So right now we're kind of traveling mid-track, and then we try to get back, and then we still lift through the right-hander. If we, focus on preparing for this right-hander, then we bring it more over this way and prepare for a cleaner right-hander. We're traveling at a higher rate of speed from this point all the way to this point down here. And that is a time gain that you can't match by just sort of hazardly, rolling it through everywhere that you go. So it's all about making the plan as to where can I gain the time, where can I gain the most time, and how do I prepare my line in order to maximize this section of the track. So what we're doing is realistically maximizing this corner and maximizing 7. And everything else is kind of just in our way. Instead of just giving up a little bit on 7, giving up a little bit on 8, giving up a little bit on 9, giving up a little bit on 10, all the way through.
Absolutely.
Really, it all leads to just having a strategy with the lines and not getting mixed up with what every single other person is doing, but just having a strategy on how we can maximize this part of the track and gain time here. And once you've found a little bit of time, it's exponential to everywhere that you go, just knowing that you can look at the track a little bit differently than what, let's say the track specialists.
Yeah. It's interesting with that, and this is kind of maybe a subcontext of what we're talking about, but we often see as drivers, especially in these sections, spend a lot of time on maintenance throttle. And one of the points that I keep talking about with the drivers that I coach are, if you take the typical amateur driver, they will probably spend more time on throttle around a lap than a professional driver. But that professional driver is going to spend a lot more time at full throttle. So into these types of sections, you're going to come in, you're going to be able to charge in full throttle, lift, coast, and then get back to that full throttle again. It's more important to be a little bit more of that aggressiveness. Anytime you're spending that maintenance throttle and having that like sacrifice mentality, you're giving up time. I try to avoid maintenance throttle as much as possible. I think that might kind of broaden the landscape even more of the mentality to approach these types of corners.
That's just it. It's, really I guess the point I wanted to make was that, it's maximizing each section to be the best for us. So like you say, maintenance throttle is a perfect way to describe it. Whereas, we're not truly committed to the whole section because we know, we have to kind of get back for the left, but we're not getting all the way back because then we're sacrificing too much. A plan in place of just, attacking and then sacrifice, attacking and then sacrifice, rather than not kind of attacking, not kind of sacrificing. That taking a much more, I would say, hardcore approach to it in a way, and being more abrupt with what we're doing with lines, that will actually allow us to be more consistent as well. Because we know that this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do. And then we're still using the techniques that we've learned, the trail braking and not getting on the throttle until the apex. We're using these in succession. Whereas, I think a section like this at pit race, it makes it massively, massively difficult to try to only get on throttle at apex, because we're so in between on where the car is going and what we're doing.
Yeah.
This allows us to maximize our fundamentals, which in turn maximizes just the time benefits of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. So everybody, what we want to do really quick here is we have a quick announcement of something that we're really excited about. So I want to take you through that. I'm going to send a link out. And then at the end, we're going to open up, this will take 5 minutes if that, open up to a Q&A session. So we've got quite a while. We want to answer as many questions as we can. So give us 2 minutes of your time, then we're going to have you answer or ask any questions. So the one thing that we've been working towards and is coming very, very soon is premium content from Racers 360 and all of our coaches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a new website that's coming out soon with everybody, and then talk about what you guys can expect to see. So I'm going to share my screen here and get this out of the way. So we are really excited to announce premium content coming your way in August. But for everybody joining today, we do have a special early bird where you're going to save 20%. So what we're going to do here is within the Racers 360 dashboard, what you can expect to find are all of our track breakdowns. We already have track breakdowns, which are 15-minute corner-by-corner videos, kind of like what you saw today, for 35 tracks across the U.S. That'll be up to about 50 very soon, and then we're going to start talking about international tracks as well. You're going to have more webinars, and that'll be included in the year subscription. So every one of our coaches, Nelson, Mike, Cameron, they'll be hosting webinars that you can access for free, talk about anything they want to talk about. And then another really cool part is you're going to be able to chat with our coaches. There'll be a messaging system in there that you can follow up with coaching sessions, ask quick questions, schedule coaching, anything that you want to do, you're going to be able to access. So once again, that's going to cost just $100 throughout the year, less than $10 a month. And today you can get access for 20% off, $80 for the year. It'll be coming out in August. So it's going to be really, really cool. Here is the link to it in the chat. We'll also follow up at the end of the day, at the end of this webinar. We'll include a link in there. We're really, really excited about it. There's going to be a lot of bang for buck here. A lot of our coaches are going to be creating content constantly, and you're going to have access to, again, all of our coaches as well. So we're really excited about that. I know, Nelson, we've got to work on scheduling our next webinars, and hopefully we'll have all of you joining us there as well. So I wanted to get that out of the way. Hopefully we can have you guys joining us there. And now we'd love to open it up to any Q&A, anyone that has any questions regarding anything we talked about today or anything else. Feel free to leave it in the chat here. I will give you guys a minute here to start asking some questions, and then Nelson and I will go through the next 15 minutes or so and answer some questions. Let's see here. Wait for them to start flowing in. Hopefully that all made sense to everybody today. Thanks again, everyone, for joining in too. Excited to hear the progression going forward and hopefully make an impact in everyone's driving.
I had a whole well-worded explanation of what I wanted to say, but that kind of blew up on me. So.
Don't worry, I did the same. It's funny, as coaches, you have this prepared thing, and then once you start talking about it, it comes out different every time. Awesome. So, Bill, a great question that I would love to take here on suggestions of breaking a track down into sections. Let's see here. Sorry, there's a few questions coming in. So, in terms of breaking a track down into sections, I think there's different ways that I can look at how to answer that question. So I'll talk about it in terms of how I learn a track and how I actually break down corners into each section. And hopefully that'll answer your question. So for me, what I want to do to find the limit of the car and to find where I need to, how I want to attack a track, is I really break a corner down into 3 parts. And I actually work backwards. So the first thing, the most important thing for me to figure out, is kind of what we were just talking about, is where can I place the car? Where do I need to place the car on exit? Is it a corner that I need to sacrifice some time for, or can I use all the road on exit? And you can really look at a track map for the most part and understand that. You can look at, well, it's going to be more important for me to be faster from point A to point B because it's a much longer time period, much longer distance. So I first figure that out. The next thing for me is where can I apex well, where's my apex so I can start to unwind the steering wheel and get back to initial throttle and full throttle as fast or as soon as possible. So now I've got my exit kind of figured out, right? That's kind of the easiest part. The next thing is, how do I find the limit on corner entry? The good thing about finding that exit part out first is it gives you a priority and it gives you something to feel for. So I kind of get my braking zone in a generally right spot. I'm not trying to attack brake zones yet. That's the last thing I work on. So I get it in a reasonable place. And from me there, what I want to do is start to roll in a little bit more speed every lap. A little bit more speed every lap. And this is, that little bit is different. For us, Nelson and I, we can roll in a half mile an hour more and we can feel that. For some of you, it might be 8 miles an hour more. We want to try and keep that as small as possible, because what we're going to do is we roll in a little bit each lap until we start to make mistakes that we can't execute on that exit we've already figured out. So we start to miss that apex point. We start to be late to initial throttle. And then we know, hey, we're slightly over the limit. We bring it back down, and now we've got our entry turn-in point. The last thing we work on is braking a little bit deeper, and again, you do that little by little, especially there because that's the highest risk point, until you start to make mistakes on the turn-in point or on the apex, and that's where you bring it back down a little bit. And that's kind of how I break down a track. Hopefully that all makes sense here. Nelson,
next question was, with faster corners, would you prefer a throttle held at a steady rate, or brake, come right off throttle, and then wait to go to full throttle? So I can somewhat answer this. I mean, fast corners are my favorite. So it's what I think is my strong suit. So I'm garbage at the technical stuff. Yeah, I mean, with faster corners, you're absolutely right. Like you do want to be a little bit smoother with your inputs. As you're traveling at a higher rate of speed, the car is much more on edge for a longer period of time, where in a slow corner, it's really just sort of, pitching it in, getting it turned and getting on the gas. In a fast corner, you're in that loaded period for a much longer period of time. So all of your inputs are, let's say, under a microscope because the car is really on edge. So what you do want to do is, I mean, the concept is the same, where you do want your minimum speed to be right at the apex and you accelerate out from the apex. You don't want to be on the gas before the apex, unless, as Dion said earlier, it is to solve some sort of car problem. If you do have a lot of oversteer, and staying with a little bit of throttle allows the car to stay more subtle, that's one thing. But if in a perfect world, the car handling is okay and we're just trying to maximize the corner, you do still want to focus on not getting on the power before the apex. We want that car to rotate, and we want to have our destination. So we want to be, looking ahead, knowing where our car is going to end up, have the car pointed, and drive out of the corner. You don't want to be, kind of braking and really unsettling the car too much. But when you are getting into that throttle, you will likely get into it a little bit slower than you would coming out of a slow corner. To stay at steady state throttle, I mean, if it's not something that's flat, but you're working off of a lift, then for sure, use the lift and don't use, again, use the coast. Use the coast as much as you can. If you don't have to use the brakes, tremendous. But, if
as long as you're not lifting from like 1,000 feet away and just roll it into the corner, right?
Yeah, the gears slow it all the way down. But when you are braking, you have to, in a high-speed section, you just have to be very alert of what you're doing. When you're coming out of the brake, you have to be coming out of the brake a little bit easier. When you're coming into the throttle, you have to go into the throttle a little bit easier. You want your weight transfer to be very, very subtle. And that's really the biggest thing with high-speed corners, and accuracy. Make sure you've got your apex and make sure you've got your trajectory coming out of the corner. Once you have that, you can attack it as much as you want with the car underneath you. But it actually lends to the first question. Have your sort of specifics done right first, and then start carrying your speed more and more and more.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions here I want to get to. just really quick because I can answer this one really fast. I apologize if I butcher your name, Shihan. We have an article actually on left foot braking. So if you go to racers360.com, click education, type left foot braking. I wrote a whole thing about that. So just that'll give you a quicker one. I'm going to go over to Patrick, and then I'm going to go to Angelica. So Patrick has a question about New Jersey Motorsports Park, and I'll take this one because I know the track pretty well. So his question is would you recommend keeping a wider entry to somewhere like the Octopus at New Jersey Motorsports Park where it leads onto a long straightaway? Or is it okay to roll more speed in because the corner is long enough to set up for a good exit? So Patrick, in that left-hander at New Jersey Motorsports Park, that is a really long corner. I would want to treat that more like a double apex. So that's a place where we see drivers often opening up wide and kind of turning in. It's very similar to the first corner that Nelson showed where they minimize too much the beginning of the corner, and now they're stuck because they feel too slow with a lot of maintenance throttle. Now they're understeering and only getting back to full throttle until it's too late. That's a corner where I want to drive it in hard and then to where the car understeers off the inside a little bit, and then I can get that rotation, and I can still get that that later apex, but now I've got more rotation, I've attacked the entry more, and I can actually get a better exit because of that. So for me, that's more of a double apex corner somewhat. It's not a track where you can use all of the road. You only end up about a tire width, 2 tire widths off the inside, but it still is more of that type of mentality. Angelica, let's get over to your question here. Let me just pull that one up. Sorry. Would you attack the corners the same way in a lower horsepower car that is dependent on momentum? Nelson, do you want to take that one? I also have some thoughts there too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the concepts are the same. Attacking a corner based on your car is a unique thing. I mean, every car works a little bit differently. Some handle better, some accelerate better, some brake better. So that's a little bit tough, but in a low horsepower car, I mean, I know it well. I actually raced Formula V, so I think they're like 65 horsepower. So that's about as low horsepower as it gets, I think. But yeah, so you do, I mean, when you're in a low horsepower car or in a momentum car, you want to carry that speed. You don't want to do that weight transfer prior to the apex. You want to, keep the load on the front tires, and then at the apex, you're accelerating out. Corners will dictate where, if you adjust that or not, but you just want to focus on carrying the speed. If it's a momentum car, you're carrying the speed. You're not being so aggressive on the braking. You're more or less focused on how you can maintain your mid-corner speed. Obviously, in higher horsepower cars, then you can really stop and go. In a lower horsepower car, it's really about the speed that you can carry and keeping that momentum up. But still, you're not sort of lifting before the corner and then driving through the corner. You're still getting on the power at the same point, and that's really the key to focus on.
Yeah, I know for myself, I've got a little bit of Spec Miata MX-5 experience as well, and it's super easy to get lazy and pick up the throttle earlier because the cars are pretty free on entry. And I catch myself doing this all the time as well, where I'm over slowing because they're super free on entry and I'm getting back to throttle too early. And the problem is, in a low horsepower car, you can kind of get away with it because it's a car that you can commit back to full throttle and you can get it to still kind of turn, right? Like you can commit back to full throttle before the apex and get it to still turn where you want it to. The problem is, though, and then what's overlooked, is now you still have a lot more steering input in the car, a lot more scrub, and that is really a big negative in those lower horsepower cars. So while it might be a little bit more important in terms of safety to be critical about where you get the throttle in a higher horsepower car, it's still really important technique for lower horsepower cars as well. I want to get over to Matt's question. And Nelson, you're probably going to be a better person on this. You're more the engineering mind than I am. Sorry, let me just read the whole question here. Is it necessary to sacrifice car setup based on track configuration? And how do you determine what corners or sections are okay to sacrifice to maximize overall lap time speed? That's a pretty tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, it's the thing is, kind of back to what I was saying with line, you have to look at the track as what is going to benefit me most. Is the track mainly straights connected by hairpins? Then we're going to focus on straight line speed and making sure that the car is 100% quick in a straight line. Is it, a bunch of really, really long, decreasing radius corners where we really want the car to stick under trail braking? Then we're going to focus on that. We have to look at, we just have to look at it from a purely analytical point of view of, what percentage of the lap is what's the most percentage of the lap, and how does the car need to behave for the majority of the lap? We focus on that. If there's, like, let's take, I don't know, we can take Watkins Glen, for example, where, there's a lot of banked turns and they're really pretty high speed and we need the car to really rotate in the banking well, then that's something that we'll focus on. We'll likely run a slightly stiffer setup and really get the car to rotate because it's compressing in that banking, and we can utilize that. If it's a different type of circuit where it's really slippery, or it tends to always be a low grip circuit, then we're going to do the opposite. We're going to try to really make sure that the car will give us the most traction at all times and will benefit the most from that. So it is, again, I mean, track specific. I wouldn't ever say that we're sacrificing setup. It's just about, is it mainly slow corners? Do we really have to set the car up soft to get through the slow stuff? Or is it mainly fast corners where we really have to get the car to rotate in the fast corners? We just have to look at it as a whole, and do the best that we can with it. I'll tell you right now that there's never been a race car in the world that had a perfect setup. So we're all doing okay there.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to Dennis's question, and I'm going to go over to you, John. So Dennis is asking, about to do my first Roval and a Spec Miata at Texas Motor Speedway. Can you give me some advice on how to handle the banking? It's interesting. I heard about this event. We're going to do an article as well on how to handle banking. I don't think there's any specific ways in terms of techniques to set up for a banking. What I think is important is how to be mentally ready for them, because they're a lot different than you expect. And I remember the first time I went to Daytona and for the 24, it kind of throws you off mentally. So what's important and what many drivers don't realize is where you're looking on a banking is not straight out where you normally look. Because if you're doing that, you're just looking at the road directly in front of you. So you have to almost be looking up towards the top left of the windscreen, and that's where you're looking forward, as far forward as you can see. And you're not going to be able to see very far, which is very intimidating and very kind of sketchy to start off with. So just expect G-forces to push you down and into the seat a little bit and be looking up. So if you have one of those banners, something like that across the windshield, sometimes taking out a little piece in the top left will help you see further ahead. That's the most important thing. And try not to hit the apron, but also for your first time there, and I don't know Texas to be honest, but I think it's a pretty steep banking, somewhat similar to Daytona. You'll want to be closer in. You don't want to use up the dirty side. The dirty at the top takes a while for it to rubber in. So kind of treat it like a more traditional corner where you hold the apex for longer, looking as far forward, up as possible in the corner is what's going to help the most. So John Carson, very open-ended question. Any tips for racecraft? I wanted to answer that because I have one that I consistently see a lot of incidents come up, but I did want to, of course, plug our race analysis service because I think that is our strongest service. I can't recommend it enough. And in that race analysis service, you upload your entire race, and our coaches will coach you on everything from the mental side, consistency, race starts, race craft, overtaking, defending position, and how to go faster. I really can't recommend that. It is a really great service. But the number one tip I have for racecraft, well, it's two parts. One, when you're overtaking a car, a lot of people will come in, and I'm going to use my hands here because, of course, I'm a driver. A lot of people will come in, drive, and then to feel like they're minimizing risk, they'll go far away to the inside. They'll pop and then go all the way to the inside of the track. There's two problems with that. One, the car that's being overtaken can't see you anymore. They're in their blind spot. So there's a higher risk of them turning down in on you. Then there's a bigger distance between the two cars. So if they're to turn in, that's going to be a bigger impact than if you were to pop and keep as close as possible to that car. Now, keeping as close as possible to that car is also going to help you. You'll get a little bit of a side draft, and you'll actually suck them back with dirty air. That's why in NASCAR, they're really close as possible. So if you pop and you're close, there's a much bigger chance of that car seeing you, hearing you, knowing you're there. And then if for whatever reason they still can't tell, don't know you're there, if they turn in, it's kind of more of a glance, much less of an impact. So that really lowers the risk, and it's probably one of the things I see the most when, for racecraft. The second thing is defending position. You do not defend your position in the brake zone. You do it proactively ahead of the brake zone. Once you're braking, you should no longer be moving, because that's where things go wrong. You come out of the corner. If you don't get a good exit, you stay to the inside. That's your line. You make the car go around the outside. That's a good defending move. We're not going to be kind of moving in the brake zones to defend. Let's see here. Trying to see any more questions.
Yeah, there was one up here, just Sheehan on left foot braking. Did you answer that one?
Sorry, left foot braking. Yes, I'd say we had a really good article on that one. Ultimately, left foot braking is not faster. It is really driver dependent. So for some drivers, it's faster. For some drivers, it's not. Some of the fastest drivers in the world that I've been around, Rennie Rast, the DTM champion, was a teammate of mine, Spencer Pumpelly, both right foot breakers, actually. I'm a left foot breaker, so I would be biased. So
yeah. Left foot braking is 100% better. So we'll just.
So I mean, it's a good debate to have. I've seen plenty of people right foot brake. I struggle with a good heel toe, and I feel more confident with my left foot braking. So for me, left foot braking is better. But it's for amateur racing. It's for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Neither here nor there. It's not that important.
Most important corner at most sport. And how would you drive it in a momentum car, no downforce? So, well, my brother and my father both have lap records at most sport to this day. So, and being Canadian, I've never actually gotten to race there. But I have driven it, and it is one of the best tracks in the world. Most important corner, I mean, in a momentum car, so again, I know of it in like Formula V and stuff like that. It's such a ballsy circuit that, turn 1 and turn 2 and turn 8, they're all really, really high speed flowing corners. Still, the most important corner on the track is 5B, 100%. And it's all about how you get your exit onto the back straight. So, it's just getting up over the hill, carrying that speed through 5A, getting the car rotated, and getting on the gas to point it down the track. So all of this coaching leads to the perfect explanation of 5B, where you really want to have the car rotated, then you can get to the throttle. You don't want it to understeer out to the outside of the track. So 5B, 100% the most important corner on the track. And getting a good run there, I mean, it does everything for you. It allows you to pass. It allows you to defend. It does everything for you. And it's where the majority of the lap time is won or lost.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw a question above, and then I think we're going to end on John Roeder's question here. One question above was asking if with the premium content, are we going to have discounts as well for our coaching services? What I can say is we will definitely be offering many things throughout the year, many incentives. There's not going to be a straight discount right away, but there'll be many incentives coming. We do have partners already joining us that are going to be offering exclusive deals. I can't say anything yet, but we have, if you go to the page, you'll see our partner section. You'll see Save Out, Apex Pro, SimCraft as well are already signing up to be hopefully giving you guys some really cool discounts. That I can say one thing, it'll be more discounts than the $80, but I can't tell everybody exactly what the deals are yet. That'll be announced when we go live in August. So I apologize for not being able to be as clear as I'd like to be there yet. So to end on John's question, because I kind of like to, I've got a way I like to coach this, but Nelson, I also want to hear your input on how you would coach it too. He's asking, I'm working on trying to carry more entry speed. Any recommendations on the best approach to practice? So this is a really tough one to practice, because anytime we're working on finding the limit of the car, we're going to be put at a higher risk. One of the things I typically don't like to talk about are the risks, but it's a good thing to talk about right now. So way I like to coach this is to find low risk corners to experiment playing at the limit, because we are going to make mistakes at the limit. So off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of a corner that's low risk, and of course I'm going blank right now. If we're going to talk about entry speed into a hairpin and braking, turn 7. Oh yeah, turn 7 at Sonoma is a really good one. I was thinking about turn 7 at Sebring. So let's use turn 7 at Sonoma. Thanks, Matt. So turn 7 at Sonoma, there's wide space. You can spin and not hit anything, and that's what I consider a low risk type of corner. So the way I like to work on things kind of goes back into the throttle technique. So turn 7, I want to use a lot of road in the middle of the corner, and I only want to start applying the throttle as we're heading back towards that second apex. It's a hairpin, long middle for anyone that hasn't driven there. Coda, lots of corners that you can work on this. So for me, what I want to do is, like we talked about before, I wanted to track. We've got our apex point, we've got our throttle point, we've got our exit. So now what we're working on is every lap, rolling in that more entry speed, rolling in that more entry speed. We're not doing that by braking deeper. That's not how we're going to work on rolling entry speed. We're going to work on it by having that good hit of the initial brakes, and then coming off of that heavy brake pressure earlier and coming off of it, and even letting the coast start off with, but eventually working on trail braking it down. And what you're going to do is you're going to, every lap, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. If we do that right, you're going to eventually go over the limit. You're going to make a small mistake. Now, if we do it right, it's a small mistake. We missed the apex by half car length, or we can't get back to throttle where we want to. But it becomes really, it's difficult in the beginning to make those small manipulations. And that's why I said pick a low risk corner, because in the beginning, you're going to feel like, oh, I'm only going a tiny bit faster, but it might be 5 miles an hour faster, and that might cause you to spin. And that's okay, because we have to go over the limit to start to play at the limit. And that's why we pick these low risk corners, because the more experience you get at going a little bit over, bringing it back down, no too much, okay, a little bit more, oh, no too much, the more time you get to play there and feel what it feels like, the more saves you do, the more your confidence rises. And what's going to happen is you're going to naturally start to get closer and closer to the limit in those faster, higher speed, higher risk corners. But we really want to practice in the lowest risk possible way. So that's why we want to experiment in turn 7, because we want those mistakes. So that's the way I like to coach it. Nelson, do you have a different way or anything to expand on that?
No, actually, I agree with that completely. Like you do have to put yourself over the limit, and it's perfect to put it in those low risk situations where you have some runoff and you have some space. Like turn 1 at Watkins Glen is another one I think of, in where you have some room to play with it. And once you start, you'll bring it in over the limit, and the car will slide out a little bit wider or whatever, and we're not able to get on the gas right away. We'll continue trying. What that's going to allow us to do is we're then going to get used to that speed. We're going to somewhat, have the muscle memory forget the slower speed that was allowing us to, just go through the speed that we were going before. And we're going to get more used to, just like what you had said, we're going to get more used to that speed, more used to the car moving around at that speed. And then we're going to start, okay, well, now I need to get my throttle back to the apex. I'm getting on the throttle too late. And that's really where, I think Dion and I play the most. Is I rarely run into the issue where I'm having to get on the throttle too early. I'm usually like, God, I got to tape my foot to the floor because I'm not getting on the throttle soon enough. And that's where you want to get to, because that's where the speed is. You're already traveling at speed. And so, best practice for me is I really start to figure out how hard I can drive it in. And then I try to push my throttle back to getting closer to the apex, from being way out on the exit. And then as I move that's where I sort of join it. Now, once you throw in new tires and everything, the whole world changes.
Yeah, I definitely if you look at a pro driver, if you look at where the mistakes come, it's definitely going to be from rolling way too much entry speed in and being way late to throttle, versus the other way around. And then the last question we're going to answer here, just kind of builds off of this one that actually makes me think, I'm not sure. Angelica asked, for this whole concept, would you pick one corner at a time, or would you do multiple corners at a time to work on this? What do you think, Nelson?
Yeah, I think it depends on the corners. Like if it's at Coda or something like that, where we have 87 corners around the track, then you need to work on multiple corners at one time for sure. But if it's if it's let's say a very stereotypical corner, then you can.
If we use Lime Rock as an example, build off of that, right? It's a very short lap, and there's not a lot of time or places you can experiment there. Like it's high risk. Like there, you only have the left-hander as a quote-unquote safer corner to experiment. So I think that would be a good example of a track that's only going to be one corner versus like the Dakota where there's a lot. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and that's just it. So I mean, and it's what information are you gathering from it? If you've maybe overshot or blown one corner, are you in the same mindset to really learn from the next corner that you're going to attack that way? It's all about how you're approaching it. If you treat it like, okay, this is my quick lap, I got to try to do this a little bit quicker, and you blow it, you're harder on yourself than if you're just like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, and we'll see where we're at. So I prefer more one corner at a time, but it 100% depends on the track, and Lime Rock's a beauty example because you can't try it anywhere.
I love that place. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. We really appreciate it. We hope you got a lot out of this. If you have any questions at all, you can always follow up with us. We will be, this has been recording. So tonight, we will email all of you with the recording of this. You've got the link. We'll include the link to our premium content if you want to join. We really hope you'll consider doing that. If you have any questions, feel free to email us anytime. Eventually, you'll be able to chat with us straight through Racers 360 as well. Nelson, again, thank you as well for joining us. And we'll see you at a racetrack soon.
Absolutely.